Royal followers believed they had a clear picture of Princess Beatrice's life. Yet the stories quietly circulating about her husband, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi, have started revealing something far more troubling. What once seemed like idle chatter has grown into a web of concealed ties, uncomfortable controversies, and secrets the royal institution would prefer stayed buried. Despite the carefully composed smiles and polished public appearances, something doesn't quite add up. Something that keeps pushing its way to the surface. Are these merely blown out of proportion rumors, or is there genuine truth hiding just beneath the gloss? Share your thoughts in the comments as we explore these 15 unsettling revelations. Number 15. The hidden breakup. Well before Princess Beatrice came into his life, Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi appeared to have everything figured out with Dara Huang by his side. This was no casual fling. It was a grounded, committed relationship built on serious long-term intentions. Dara was no ordinary partner. A Harvard-educated woman who had gone on to launch her own thriving design business entirely from the ground up. She was ambitious, focused, and fiercely independent. To the outside world, the two of them looked like a perfect match. Engaged, deeply bonded, and apparently headed toward a future that seemed rock solid. But underneath that flawless exterior, something dark and quiet had already taken root. Then came the kind of news that is supposed to bring two people closer. Dara was expecting a child. For many couples, a pregnancy signals a new chapter of unity and shared joy. But for them, it seemed to do the opposite, exposing fault lines that had been hiding beneath the surface for far too long. Rather than closing the gap between them, the distance only grew wider. Conversations dried up. The warmth that once filled their relationship was replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Behind their public image, behind the doors no one else could open, life looked entirely different. Days passed, sometimes entire weeks, with barely a word exchanged between them. Picture what it must feel like to carry a child while quietly falling apart inside, wondering if you will have to face it all alone. Dara likely sensed where things were heading. Yet she held on, fighting for what they had once shared. In the end, though, the pressure became too great. One explosive night, things were said that could not be unsaid, and the relationship crossed a line it could never come back from. The silence that followed was deafening, and what came next after their split was even more unexpected. Then their child came into the world. Would this new life serve as a reason to reconcile, or would it only push them further apart? Keep watching to find out. Number 14. Newborn son and silent distance. The year 2016 brought the birth of their son, Christopher Wolf Mapelli-Mozzi, affectionately known as Wolfie, a moment that should have offered a reason to start fresh and rebuild. Instead, he arrived into a relationship that was already quietly unraveling, even if the world outside had no idea. The year that followed painted a misleading picture entirely. Throughout 2017, Edoardo and Dara continued to show up at public events together, standing shoulder to shoulder, wearing easy smiles, giving every impression that nothing had changed between them. They looked united, stable, committed. But those camera-ready moments were nothing more than carefully held illusions. Behind the scenes, the dynamic had already shifted in ways invisible to anyone on the outside. The closeness that had once defined them had eroded, replaced by emotional distance and tensions no one spoke aloud. By 2018, the pretense could no longer hold. Their relationship ended, not in a dramatic public announcement, but in near total silence. It dissolved quietly, almost invisibly, as if it had simply faded away. But what followed only deepened the mystery surrounding Edoardo. Within just a few months of that quiet split, his name was being connected to Princess Beatrice. The speed of it raised eyebrows. It felt too swift, too convenient to go unnoticed. Many began quietly asking what had truly been happening long before anyone knew to look. But before we explore that connection, it is worth examining a moment from Edoardo's past that fundamentally altered how the world perceived him. Number 13. A death in the spotlight. The year 2011 brought a phone call that would change Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi's life in an instant. His stepfather, Christopher Shale, had died without warning. What made the loss even more jarring was where it happened. Not at home in private, but in the middle of Glastonbury Festival, one of the United Kingdom's most massive and high-profile music events. The noise, the crowds, the flashing lights, all of it formed the backdrop to a deeply personal tragedy that immediately became very public. What made the situation even more charged was the timing. In the days leading up to his death, Shale had already been thrust into controversy after a private political memo he authored was leaked to the press. The document contained blunt, unflattering assessments of figures within his own political circle, and the fallout was swift. He was already under the harsh glare of public scrutiny when he died. Shale's position as chairman of David Cameron's local Conservative Association only amplified the story further, transforming a family's grief into a matter of national discussion. The discovery of his body in a backstage area of the festival site sent shockwaves through the media. What any family would have wanted to process privately instead played out across front pages and television screens. The collision of a leaked document, political scandal, and sudden death within such a compressed period left behind a cloud of unanswered questions. For Eduardo and his family, mourning in peace was simply not an option. Their loss unfolded in full public view, and for Eduardo specifically, it marked the start of a recurring theme in his life where private pain and public exposure seemed destined to keep colliding. Number 12. Hidden Royal Connections. Eduardo came into the world on November 19, 1983, at London's Portland Hospital, a prestigious private facility long associated with wealthy and well-connected families, including those with ties to the royal household. From his very first day, the threads connecting him to privilege and influence were already present. Notably, Princess Beatrice had also been born at the same hospital years before, a small but curious detail that placed the two in proximity long before they ever met. His father, Alejandro Mapelli, carried an extraordinary international story. Originally from Argentina, shaped by an Italian upbringing and educated in England, he moved fluidly across cultures and continents. He even competed for Great Britain at the 1972 Winter Olympics, a testament to both his adaptability and drive. He later built a respected career as an international art dealer, earning a place within the Royal Society of Arts. Eduardo's mother, Nikki Williams Ellis, carved out her own accomplished path spanning politics, charitable work, and design. When she remarried and Christopher Shale became part of the household, the family dynamic grew more layered, adding new influences and expectations to Eduardo's already complex upbringing. That environment demanded constant adaptation. Navigating different personalities, varying expectations, and shifting household dynamics became second nature to him from an early age. He absorbed a wide range of cultural perspectives and learned to move comfortably between very different worlds. Rather than belonging firmly to one identity, he developed the ability to connect with people from all kinds of backgrounds, a quality that would quietly shape both his personal and professional life in the years ahead. The steady exposure to change over time built in him a calm, understated confidence that made transitions feel natural rather than disorienting. It laid the groundwork for a life that would one day intersect with royalty in ways few could have predicted. But there is another dimension to his background that tends to get raised without ever being fully examined, particularly the matter of his title and what it actually represents. Let's take a closer look. Number 11. The Shadowed Legacy of a Noble Title. The Mapelli-Mozzi family carries the hereditary title of Count, a distinction originating from the former Italian monarchy and officially bestowed in 1913 under King Victor Emmanuel III. On first glance, it reads as a mark of old-world prestige, an elegant link to a long-vanished era of European nobility. But the history attached to that title is far less comfortable than it appears. The very king who established this noble rank was the same ruler who, in 1938, signed into law a brutal set of racial statutes targeting Italian Jews. Those laws stripped Jewish citizens of their civil rights, drove them out of public life, and for many, served as a precursor to deportation under Nazi occupation. The title Eduardo holds today is therefore tied, indirectly but undeniably, to one of the darkest chapters in modern European history. Although the Italian monarchy was dissolved in 1946 and all associated titles were stripped of any legal standing, the Mapelli-Mozzi family has continued to use the count designation. It carries no official authority today, yet it remains central to how the family defines and presents itself. It speaks to a deep investment in legacy and lineage, a determination to maintain a connection to the past even after the structures supporting that past have long since collapsed. That same pull toward heritage is equally visible in the family's ancestral property, Villa Mapelli, situated in northern Italy. The estate is not merely a grand home but a landmark with genuine historical depth. Its origins stretch back to the 15th century, when it functioned as a monastery before eventually passing into the Mapelli family's hands. It has been carefully preserved and handed down through generations, standing today as a tangible expression of just how deeply embedded the family is in Italy's long history. For Edoardo, growing up surrounded by such a place meant living inside a constant reminder of generational weight and inherited identity. Every room, every corridor told a story that predated him by centuries, quietly shaping the way he came to understand who he was and where he belonged. Number 10. Edoardo's turning point after loss. Edoardo's academic path reflected the kind of structured privilege that opens doors others never see. He began at the Dragon School in Oxford, a renowned preparatory institution favored by well-connected families, before progressing to Radley College, a rigorous boarding school with high academic and disciplinary standards. He went on to the University of Edinburgh, where he completed a master's degree in politics. From the outside, his educational journey looked impressively mapped out, each step building logically on the last, preparing him for a life of leadership and influence. Yet no amount of elite schooling could prepare him for what 2011 brought. The sudden and extremely public death of his stepfather hit him with a force that no classroom could have anticipated. Grief by its nature demands space. But his grief had none. It unfolded under the scrutiny of an entire nation, forcing him to hold himself together in public when every instinct might have been to fall apart. He had no choice but to keep his composure, to carry his pain privately while the world watched from the outside. That experience, however, did not drive him inward. Instead, it pushed him toward action. He threw himself into charitable pursuits, raising funds and lending his time to causes that needed visibility. Among his more demanding commitments was an overnight cycling challenge across London, a grueling physical undertaking that signaled both his resilience and his need to channel emotion into something purposeful. He also extended his efforts internationally, playing a role in supporting the creation of Rwanda's first grass cricket stadium, using sport as a vehicle for opportunity. On the surface, these were acts of generosity. But they also revealed something telling about who he was, someone who responded to pain not by retreating but by redirecting, keeping himself moving forward rather than sitting with loss. What still lingers beneath all of that visible activity, though, is a deeper question about the pressures he was carrying into adulthood and whether those pressures ever truly found resolution. And amid all of this, something serious was quietly unfolding that would shake the trust of an entire community. Just how entangled was he in what came next? Stay with us. Number 9. The collapse of trust. Residents along Queensland's Gold Coast had extended their confidence to Edoardo in the most personal way possible. They had handed over their savings, not small or casual sums, but money built up painstakingly over years of hard work and self-denial, money that represented their hopes for a more secure future. They had every reason to believe their investment was sound. The venture at the heart of it, the Mastaba Ocean Club, was a luxury coastal development that radiated exclusivity and ambition. It promised a lifestyle of elegance, comfort, and modern sophistication in a stunning beachfront setting. The marketing surrounding it was polished to perfection. Glossy images of sweeping ocean views, architectural beauty, and refined living filled promotional materials, all of it carefully designed to inspire confidence and excitement. The language used was equally powerful, packed with bold assurances and the kind of messaging that made the opportunity feel not just attractive but virtually guaranteed. Media coverage lent additional credibility to the project, framing it as part of a broader international vision backed by serious and trustworthy players. For ordinary people looking in, this did not feel like a gamble. It felt like a once-in-a-lifetime opening, solid, credible, and life-changing. As momentum built, more and more people committed their financial futures to the project. Families pooled their resources, envisioning either a dream home or a meaningful financial return. Every signal pointed toward stability. Every message reinforced the sense that this development was in capable, dependable hands. Then, without any public warning, the entire thing came apart. The company behind the Mastaba Ocean Club collapsed into administration almost without notice. Overnight, the development was abandoned. Workers left, construction halted, and the grand vision that had drawn in so many simply ceased to exist. What investors were left with was nothing but silence, broken promises, and the devastating realization that both their money and their trust had vanished along with the project. The emotional toll was immense. And adding another uncomfortable layer to the entire situation was the role Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi had played in connection to it all. Number 8. Bonda Empire. There is a side to the Bonda property story that rarely makes it into the headlines. Edoardo launched the company in 2007 at the age of just 23, moving directly from university into the competitive world of London property development. Young as he was far from starting with nothing. His family background and well-established social connections gave him access to networks and opportunities that most people entering the industry could only dream of. His founding concept was straightforward and seemingly savvy. Identify pockets of London that had been overlooked, acquire them, transform them into high-end residences, and sell to a wealthy clientele seeking something distinctive. It was a lean, focused strategy built on timing and taste. What followed exceeded even those early ambitions. Over the course of less than 20 years, Bonda accumulated a development portfolio valued at more than £875 million, evolving from a modest startup into one of London's more prominent luxury property firms. Edoardo, who has spoken openly about living with dyslexia, appeared to channel his strengths in spatial thinking, design, and creativity directly into his work. The brand he built was sleek, refined, and consistently positioned at the upper end of the market. But as Bonda's profile grew, so did scrutiny of its underlying narrative. The company had long positioned itself as a champion of overlooked and undervalued London neighborhoods, framing its work as a form of regeneration. Edoardo reinforced this message in interviews and public appearances, presenting the business as one with a social conscience. Critics, however, were not convinced. Journalists and housing experts began questioning the sincerity of that message, particularly when one of Bonda's flagship developments materialized in Notting Hill, a neighborhood that could scarcely be described as neglected or underserved. The contradiction was hard to ignore. All of this unfolded against the backdrop of a worsening housing crisis in London, where soaring property prices were pushing ordinary families out of communities they had lived in for generations. In that climate, adding more luxury supply to an already unaffordable market struck many as compounding the problem rather than addressing it. Through all of it, Edoardo remained outwardly composed and unapologetic, continuing to build and speak without visible hesitation. That unshakable calm has been one of his defining features. But it also raises a question. What really drew this carefully constructed world into the orbit of a sudden and unexpected royal relationship? Was it coincidence, or was something else at work behind the scenes? Number 7. Princess Beatrice's broken engagement. The engagement between Princess Beatrice and Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi lasted a mere 51 days, transforming what should have been a milestone of joy into one of the more puzzling episodes in recent royal history. Before Edoardo, Beatrice had spent the better part of a decade in a serious relationship with Dave Clark, which concluded without a proposal or any public explanation. Her path toward Edoardo began through deep-rooted social ties between the Windsor family and the Mapelli Mozzi circle, a connection that developed slowly and away from public view. By 2018, the two were seeing each other privately. Their first shared public appearance came in March 2019 at a London charity event, and by May of that year their relationship was effectively confirmed when they attended Lady Gabriella Windsor's wedding together. In September 2019, Edoardo proposed with a ring commissioned from jeweler Sean Lean, an artist celebrated for his bold, unconventional aesthetic. Lean's work frequently draws on powerful and sometimes dark imagery, exploring the tension between beauty and shadow. Buckingham Palace confirmed the engagement on September 26, 2019. Yet behind the formal announcement, there were reportedly reservations within parts of the royal family about the pace at which things had moved. Meanwhile, Beatrice was quietly preparing herself for the life ahead, one she envisioned as stable, hopeful, and finally settled. That vision lasted just 51 days before the engagement came apart suddenly, and without a clear public explanation. The story attracted significant attention not only because of the brevity of the engagement, but because of everything surrounding it. The personal histories involved, the speed of the relationship's progression, and the emotional stakes for both parties. It also served as a vivid reminder of just how exposed royal relationships are, where choices made in private are immediately absorbed into a public narrative shaped by speculation and commentary. Beatrice and Eduardo's early chapter together was one defined by both genuine personal weight and the relentless pressure of royal scrutiny, raising questions about timing, compatibility, and the unseen forces that ultimately brought that brief engagement to such an abrupt close. Number 6. Hidden truth behind Beatrice's wedding. When Princess Beatrice and Edoardo Mapelli-Mozzi married in the summer of 2020, the ceremony looked nothing like what anyone had imagined for a royal wedding. There were no sweeping crowds, no global broadcast, no grandeur. Instead, the occasion was subdued to the point of feeling almost covert, a far cry from the pageantry traditionally associated with royal unions. The official explanation centered on the restrictions imposed by the global pandemic, which had upended virtually every aspect of public and private life. But for many observers, the stripped-back nature of the event prompted deeper questions. Was the pandemic the only reason, or were other factors quietly shaping the decision? Several commentators drew a connection between the low-key ceremony and the mounting controversy surrounding Prince Andrew, whose public standing had been severely damaged in the preceding months. His situation had cast an uncomfortable shadow across the entire royal household, and some suggested that a grand, high-visibility wedding simply was not something the family could afford at that moment, reputationally speaking. For Beatrice, a woman who had waited long for this chapter, the day arrived wrapped in tension rather than celebration. The stripped-down nature of the event only intensified the speculation. With the guest list cut to a handful of people and every detail tightly controlled, the atmosphere felt far removed from royal tradition. Some analysts later suggested the modest scale was as much a deliberate image management decision as it was a public health measure. Whatever the full truth, what reached the public was an edited and contained version of events, carefully curated to minimize attention. The questions that lingered then have never been fully answered, and the wedding that should have marked a joyful new beginning instead became one of the most tightly managed royal occasions in living memory. Whether that control was driven by circumstance or strategy, or both, remains something many still wonder about. But what happened next would test them in ways neither of them could have anticipated. Number 5. The night everything shifted. Nobody was prepared for how early the baby would arrive. What should have been a moment of calm and anticipation became instead a night of sudden urgency. On January 22, 2025, at Chelsea and Westminster Hospital, their daughter Athena Elizabeth Rose Mapelli-Mozzi came into the world well ahead of schedule. The hours surrounding her birth were filled with tension, movement, and the particular kind of fear that comes when something precious and fragile hangs in the balance. From the outside, the couple's life had all the hallmarks of a composed and privileged existence. But beneath that surface, the weight of accumulated pressures, unspoken and relentless, had been building for far longer than anyone could see. Following their marriage, life moved at pace. They established themselves in a 4-bedroom apartment within St. James's Palace, an address that carried prestige but also constraint. Residing within its walls was nothing like owning a home. Every aspect of life there came shaped by protocol, tradition, and permissions that were not theirs to grant. The luxury was real, but so were the invisible boundaries surrounding it. Meanwhile, the institutional landscape around them was shifting. As support for Prince Andrew was gradually withdrawn by the palace, a ripple of uncertainty spread through those closely connected to him, including Beatrice. She and Eduardo occupied an unusual position, prominent enough to attract constant public interest, yet not formally designated as working royals with the corresponding protections and structures that role provides. They existed in a kind of in-between space, visible to the world but not fully anchored within its machinery. Beatrice continued to pursue her professional life with focus and discipline, holding a senior role in strategic partnerships at the technology company Affinity. It projected an image of someone successfully balancing two demanding worlds. But in 2021, that balance was disrupted when the New York Times published a detailed investigation into Affinity's founder, Zia Chishti, following serious allegations of misconduct that ultimately led to his departure from the company. Beatrice stayed in her post. No comment was issued, no public statement made. Life, at least on the surface, simply continued. Number 4. The quiet shift after the Queen's passing. Toward the end of 2022, something significant changed in the way Beatrice and Eduardo chose to live. They quietly left behind the world of palace adjacency and resettled in a spacious 6-bedroom converted farmhouse tucked into the Cotswolds countryside. The property offered everything that palace life did not: wide, open gardens, a private tennis court, a swimming pool, and the kind of unhurried rural calm that is impossible to find within royal corridors. On paper, it read like an enviable lifestyle upgrade. The home's estimated value of around £3 million only reinforced the impression of comfortable ease. But the timing of the move told a very different story. Just months before, in September 2022, Queen Elizabeth II had died. Her passing marked a seismic shift not only for the monarchy as an institution, but for those individuals who had long benefited from the quiet steadiness of her presence. For Beatrice in particular, the Queen had represented a form of protection, a source of stability and approval that carried real weight within royal circles. With her gone, that shelter disappeared. The relocation was not simply a lifestyle choice. It was, in many ways, a recalibration, an acknowledgement that the world they had been operating in had fundamentally changed and that a new footing was needed. Every aspect of their existence required reassessment in the absence of the figure who had helped anchor it. Their family at that point already included young Sienna Elizabeth Mapelli Mozzi, born in September 2021 and still a baby herself, already quietly positioned within the line of succession and the traditions that come with it. Wolfie, meanwhile, continued growing up straddling two very distinct worlds, the private rhythms of family life on one hand and the gravitational pull of royal expectation on the other. The tension between those two realities shaped him in ways that were subtle but lasting. And just as things seemed to settle into a new kind of normal, the ground shifted once again in ways that would catch everyone off guard. Number 3. Premature birth of Athena. October 2024 brought the public announcement of a second pregnancy, delivered with warmth and genuine excitement. To those watching from the outside, it appeared to be a straightforward and happy development, another welcome addition to a growing family. But behind the carefully composed announcement, a quieter and more complicated reality was taking shape. This pregnancy arrived at a time when life was already dense with demands, pulling from both private and professional directions simultaneously. As the months passed and anticipation mounted, so too did the pressure. Every public update attracted attention, every appearance was observed and interpreted. Even the most personal milestones carried the weight of public scrutiny, leaving little room for anything to unfold simply or quietly. Then, without warning, everything accelerated. Athena's arrival came far earlier than planned, and with it came a surge of fear that no amount of preparation could have softened. What had begun as a season of celebration shifted abruptly into something raw and frightening. Beatrice has since spoken about the emotional impact of those hours with striking candor. She described the experience not merely as difficult but as something that shook her to her core, a moment of genuine terror that left a mark long after the immediate danger had passed. It was a side of her that the public rarely sees, stripped entirely of the poise and composure that royal life demands. But something meaningful emerged from that fear. Rather than withdrawing from the experience, Beatrice chose to channel it into advocacy. She became involved with Born, an organization dedicated to reducing premature birth, lending her voice and her story to a cause that had become deeply personal. Number 2. The man who never speaks. Among all the figures who orbit the royal world, Edoardo Mapelli Mozzi has distinguished himself in one particular way. He simply does not speak publicly. While controversies ripple outward from the royal family, especially those connected to Prince Andrew, Edoardo remains conspicuously absent from the discourse. No press interviews, no clarifying statements, no effort to push back against the rumors or narratives that attach themselves to his name. For someone so closely woven into the fabric of royal life through his marriage to Beatrice, that silence is striking. In a media environment where most public figures instinctively reach for control of their own narrative, Edoardo takes the opposite approach entirely. He recedes, withholds, and allows the speculation to swell unchecked. Some interpret this as a form of calculated intelligence. By staying quiet, he avoids missteps, gives journalists nothing to work with, and shields both himself and his family from unnecessary exposure. Others, however, read the silence differently and more uneasily. They wonder whether the quiet is less about wisdom and more about avoiding questions that would be difficult to answer honestly. What makes it all the more striking is his consistency. Even as business ventures draw criticism or royal tensions spike into headline territory, Edoardo's outward composure never falters. He shows up at carefully chosen public events, presenting the same measured, unruffled image regardless of what surrounds him. It suggests a level of self-discipline that is genuinely impressive. But it also leaves an uncomfortable question hanging in the air. Is this privacy, or is it something closer to concealment? In the world of royalty, where language is parsed and silences are read as carefully as words, choosing to say nothing is never truly neutral. Silence speaks, and the longer it continues, the more loudly it does so, leaving those watching to fill in the spaces with their own interpretations of what might lie behind it. Number 1. Beatrice's transformation. There was a version of Princess Beatrice's life before Edoardo that looked quite different from the one the world sees today. She moved with relative independence, keeping a lower profile than many of her royal counterparts while steadily building a serious career in business and technology. The intensity of scrutiny that follows senior royals felt somewhat at arm's length from her, allowing her to develop an identity that felt distinctly her own. Once Edoardo entered her world, however, that began to change, not dramatically or all at once, but in increments that over time became impossible to overlook. The first shifts were visible in her public presentation. Her appearances grew more polished and precisely managed, increasingly aligned with the refined high-status aesthetic that defines Edoardo's professional world of luxury property and elite social circles. Then the changes moved deeper. Major life decisions, where to live, how to structure a blended family, how to position themselves within and around royal life, seemed to emerge from a shared framework rather than from individual inclination. Their departure from central royal residences in favor of a private country home felt less like a personal whim and more like a considered repositioning. Her professional life, too, appeared to shift in emphasis. Although she remained active in her career, the equilibrium between ambition and domestic responsibility seemed to tilt following motherhood and step-parenthood. Observers began asking a quiet but persistent question. Was this simply the natural evolution that comes with marriage and family, or had Edoardo's influence quietly reshaped her priorities in ways that went beyond what anyone openly acknowledged? Influence within a relationship rarely announces itself. It works gradually, rearranging the furniture of someone's life so slowly that the change only becomes obvious when you look back at where things used to be. For Beatrice, already navigating the demands of royal identity and expectation, that added layer of influence creates a particularly complex picture, one that leaves many wondering where her original path truly ended and their shared one began. So which of these revelations strikes you as the most significant? What is your take on the fuller story surrounding Princess Beatrice's husband? Leave your thoughts below, and if you found this compelling, please like and subscribe.